Hizmet and the philosophy that Mr. Gulen espouses provides for all people, not only Christians or Muslims, but for all people to share their ideas and to have a greater understanding of Islam, and that it is a religion of peace and unity. Arrived in Newark in 2005 as the ASAC in charge of the Federal Air Marshal. As the ASAC in charge of the Newark field office, which is the fourth largest field office. My name is Tom Masters. I was born in Seoul, Korea, which is in South Korea, in 1953. And I was the product of the Korean War. At the age of 5.5, I was adopted by an American couple from Kansas. I ended up as the first Asian American police officer for the state of Kansas in 1977. In 1983, I was accepted as an FBI special agent, completed the FBI Academy, and served as the first Korean American FBI agent. I accepted the position as the ASAC in charge of the Newark field office, which is the fourth largest field office within the Air Marshal Service in the country. And that's where I remained until last November, when I retired and continue my work as the Executive Director for the National Asian Peace Officers Association. I first arrived in Newark in 2005 as the ASAC in charge of the Federal Air Marshal Service. And at that time, I had an opportunity to attend a dinner function recognizing law enforcement officials from the local, state, and federal government. This function was sponsored by the Interfaith Dialogue Center. I'd never heard of the Interfaith Dialogue Center. I was very curious to see what this was about, since I had just been appointed as the ASAC of the Newark field office. I attended and met with, at that time, Dr. Levon Kosh, who was a very charismatic, very outgoing gentleman who just happened to be Muslim. And I was very interested in what the Interfaith Dialogue Center, now the Peace Islands Institute, had to offer, and why so many prominent U.S. government officials were attracted to this organization. And so as a result, I have been attending and engaged with Peace Islands Institutes since 2005, after my arrival in New Jersey. The Hizmet movement's goal and function is very similar to what I have always advocated and espoused: building networks through education and communication. And my knowledge of the Hizmet movement and Fethullah Gulen has increased over the years. My respect for Mr. Gulen has geometrically increased as a result. I know that Hizmet has established schools in over 160 countries. They have provided the opportunity for education, which is the most essential ingredient in order for peoples of various religions, ethnic backgrounds to be able to communicate. And that's the central purpose of Peace Islands Institute and Hizmet, is to enable people to be educated and to communicate and continue dialogue. And an essential component of education is to ensure that the children are fed properly and they are provided nutrition so they can learn. And that also is a very important function of Hizmet movement and what Fethullah Gulen and his followers have been able to do, work together with other organizations around the world to try and eliminate probably the worst problem that we have in this world, and that's hunger and poverty. One of the first things that Dr. Levan Kosh did was to provide me with a book written by Fethullah Gulen. And I really never knew that much about Islam and the movements within, except from what I had been instructed by the federal government. Although I was an East Asian expert, subject matter expert on East Asia, Far East Asia, Southeast Asia, I had very little and limited knowledge except from what I had heard and read through my education, personal education, and education and courses through the U.S. government and the U.S. Department of State. But here, I was given an opportunity to read firsthand the book of Mr. Gulen and to learn that this brilliant academic and a Muslim believed in science, believed in how science plays an important role and how God, one supreme being, also enhances the lives that we live. Without question, the first impression I received was the fact that he preaches that love is the essence of creation. It's throughout the book, and that's inscribed on everything that Peace Islands Institute does. And growing up Catholic, I always heard and I practiced in the whole Judeo-Christian philosophy that God is love. So the book and the teachings of Fethullah Gulen transcends any differences in religion or cultural beliefs. But we are one in that fact that love is the essence of creation and God is love. The followers of Hizmet generally are Muslim. And it's a moderate movement. It teaches and espouses understanding and dialogue as critically important to establish that peace. As a result of Hizmet, the activities sponsored by Peace Islands Institute, there is a new course of study called Peace and Conflict Resolution in some universities. And at the federal level, I was down in Washington, D.C. just a couple of months ago, and I noticed a big building right next to the Lincoln Memorial, and it was called the Peace Institute. I'd never heard of such a thing. It was one of the largest buildings down at Foggy Bottom in Washington, D.C. And I think that it's all part of what Hizmet, as well as other religious movements, have been able to do. To resolve conflict, we need to have dialogue. And the only way that we can have dialogue is for groups like Hizmet to communicate with the Christian, the Jewish, the Catholics, and all the other Muslim groups, because we all share a common identity in the fact that we are all one under one God. The most important contribution of Hizmet movement is far and away education. Education is critically important, as we all are aware here in Western society, because when we look to the Middle East and we look to the Islamic fundamentalists and those who would sacrifice their lives in the name of Allah, many of them have never been educated. They do not know how to read. They do not know how to write. They follow the beliefs of their clerics, and they have a very one-sided view, but that's all they know. Hizmet And the philosophy that Mr. Gulen espouses provides for all people, not only Christians or Muslims, but for all people to share their ideas and to have a greater understanding of Islam, and that it is a religion of peace and unity. The importance of the Hizmet movement and its role in creating 160 schools in all of these areas is it brings the ability for these young children in many situations in impoverished countries to learn and to improve their quality of life for themselves and for their families. And it is through the Hizmet movement and education that we can eliminate the one major source of conflict, and that is ignorance. And as we all know, it's ignorance that compels young men and even women from many of the Islamic communities in the Middle East to our own communities here in the United States who lack the proper education and foundation, who commit these terrible terrorist acts, not only against their enemies, but also within their own communities. So that is the one key component behind my support of the Hizmet movement and every positive thing that it does. I look at a lot of the things that I learned going through a Roman Catholic private school and the teachings of the priests and the nuns about the value of life and how God is love and we are all brothers and sisters. That was always critically important for me, and that we live our lives so that we can live a better life in the next world. And this is an important teaching of the Hizmet movement, is that they relay to these young children how important it is to broaden their education, to broaden their understanding, and to be more sensitive to those who may not share their religious beliefs. And it teaches tolerance. Those schools teach the fact that love is the essence of creation, and that God truly is love. I believe that the Hizmet movement is benefiting Turkey and will ultimately have a much greater purpose in expanding the knowledge of others about what Turkey is about, the country of Turkey, because not only is Hizmet representing Mr. Gulen and its beliefs, but it also does an unbelievable job in representing the Turkish people. Without the Hizmet movement, I would never have participated in the Ramadan dinners at the homes of Turkish people living in the New Jersey community. But by broadening the understanding of people outside the Muslim community, outside of the Turkish community, then those of us who may oftentimes be very naive about Turkey, about Islam and Muslim movements will have a much greater understanding, to realize that we have a lot in common and that we should relish what makes us different.
I've come to understand it as really a virtue-based movement primarily. So in many ways, it confirms the image of Islam that I have always held and I have always seen practiced in my face-to-face encounters with Muslims.
This movement looks to me is one of the most modern and largest Islamic movement. It is doing wonderful work in education, in social work, providing relief and other services that is doing that.